Hey, everybody out there. Again, a special treat having Paul Craig Roberts, the former Assistant Treasury Secretary under the Reagan administration, and somebody who knows inside Washington very well and all the machinations there and all of the corruption that he's seen over the years. Paul, on your website, you recently posted an article entitled "The Western World is Now a Tyranny," and you point to the weaponization of our justice system, which came down from Anglo-Saxon law centuries ago, now being upended. And among the quotes you quote here in the article is U.S. Attorney General Supreme Court Justice Robert Jackson said back in 1940 that there's a danger of prosecutors who will pick people that he thinks he should get rather than pick cases that need to be prosecuted. Also, you say, during my youth, the law was seen as a shield of our rights, not as a weapon to be used against us. That was the U.S. Supreme Court Justice George Sutherland back in 1934 saying that. So, Paul, a lot has changed, and case in point, I guess, among other things, is the persecution rather than the prosecution of Donald Trump.
That's right. Of a president of the United States is now a victim of the use of war as a weapon. Now, you have to ask yourself, how did that come about? It is such a perversion, and it's so shameful. And yet the prosecutors doing this show no sign of any shame. And neither do the judges who accept these cases. I mean, the kind of case that the Democrats are trying to bring against Trump, these would have been thrown out of court. No judge would have accepted these. And any sort of prosecutor who brought these kinds of indictments would have been disciplined, probably fired, or maybe even indicted themselves. This is such an abuse that is unimaginable to somebody in my generation. And yet the law schools are quiet. The bar associations are quiet.
The ACLU.
Yeah, and there's not a word from the ACLU. The Congress is quiet. And of course, the Justice Department are claiming, no, Biden's got nothing to do with it. Biden's got nothing to do with it.
Hey, Paul, a point that Donald Trump has made is that they're coming after me, but they're also coming after you next. True?
Of course, yeah. Look, it's obvious. If they can do this to the president of the United States, what can they do to me or you? Not only that, he's rich. He's got at least half of the voting population as supporters. Now, an ordinary person doesn't have that kind of support in the public. He hasn't got that kind of money. He doesn't have that type of office. So if they're making a case, look, shut up, do as you're told, obey the official narratives, don't dare challenge a narrative, don't dare vote for a real leader or we'll get you too. This is a message being sent to all future presidential candidates. Don't you dare go against us. Don't you dare try to lead the people. Don't say you're going to give power back to the people. We'll fix your wagon too. I mean, that's what this is all about. These suits they're even more far-fetched than nuisance suits. So what do we make of it? The only thing you can make of it, Larry, is that the law's collapsed. It's now a weapon that any prosecutor can use. And they use it selectively. Who do they want to get? Well, the black woman in Fulton County, Georgia, the black woman who's the attorney general in New York, the black guy, the black prosecutor in New York City. They want to get Trump. It's clear as day. If you look at the statements that the current black female attorney general in New York made during her campaign, you know, she won with George Soros's money. He put her in office. Well, if you look at her statements, they are stridently anti-Trump. She's calling him every kind of name. She says, I'm going to get him. I'm going to look into the deepest secrets of his real estate empire and blah, blah, blah. Well, she got elected. She says, I'm going to use the law as a weapon, and she got elected.
You know, her pre.
Well, I mean, in my, you know, when I was a young man, anybody said anything like that, that was the end of it. They'd never get elected. The media would have been all over them. The bar associations would be taking away their license.
Right.
But you can see this change. I mean, it's a complete collapse of any kind of prosecutorial integrity, any kind of respect for law, and certainly no respect for anybody's rights. So, you know, I've written about the nature of the cases. They're ridiculous.
I mean, ordinarily, Paul, the prejudgments by the by the people prosecuting Trump, including the judge, who's already said he's a bad guy. I mean, just the prejudgment alone should disqualify them for bringing charges and for sitting on the case. At least it used to be that way, correct?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It always was.
Yeah.
This is a very new thing because it's so open. Now, it's happened before. Otherwise, Sutherland and Robert Jackson wouldn't have been lecturing the U.S. attorneys not to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, but it usually would happen for some kind of a real reason. Like, you know, there's a mafia figure and they're frustrated. And,
yeah. So what started perhaps with good intentions has now been perverted into a weapon generally, right? Not the RICO you're talking about, correct?
That's right. I mean, imagine what you've seen. It's not just Trump. In the Fulton County case, that black woman has indicted 18 attorneys who represent Trump, right? Including Eastman.
Yeah.
And she claims it's a RICO case. That's the corrupt practices and law they put in to get the mafia.
Yeah. So
they claim because more than one person said that the election appears to be stolen, it means it's conspiracy. So it brings in RICO. So they arrest all of these people for demanding an accountability of the vote count. So she has criminalized challenging the vote count. Well, look how strongly Hillary Clinton challenged the vote count in 2016. Right. She didn't get arrested or RICO'd. Remember how strongly the Al Gore, George W. Bush vote count was challenged. It had to be decided by the U.S. Supreme Court. Yeah. So challenging vote counts is just normal. I mean, it happens in local elections. It happens in federal elections. I mean, it's normal. It's always happened. And yet now it's been criminalized.
You know, Paul, you mentioned a number of times a lot of these prosecutors and other figures bringing charges are black or other minorities. So there's a racial component to this in terms of how Biden, I think, has created more and more division among blacks and whites. He said I think among the first days in office, he said white supremacy is the biggest threat to America, not China, not Al Qaeda, but white supremacy. He's repeated that, hammered away at that. So are we now seeing the results of that, where there's more hatred between the races?
Yeah, I see. For decades, the blacks have been taught to hate white people because all whites are racist and all whites are responsible for slavery and all whites are responsible for blacks not being rich. And this is what's taught. It's been taught in the universities for 20, 30 years, maybe longer. So it has an effect. So blacks say, well, let's get power and get revenge. These people are hurting us, they're doing bad things to us. And we see now that all conservatives are Trump deplorables. And what's now happened, it was in Newsweek magazine just the other day, the FBI has formed a special investigative unit to investigate all Trump supporters. And the IRS has now brought 5 audits against Mike Lindell, is that his name? The My Pillow figure, because he's a Trump donor. Well, here we see that the politicization has gone even further. Now, here we've got the IRS pulled into it. And according to Lindell, they're also bringing audits against his employees. So it's like they're trying to stop him to have a workforce. That's what it seems like. And then it comes out that
in the New York, they're trying to prevent Trump from doing business in New York. Shut down.
That judge ruled that he had overstated the values of his properties, and that was fraud. And so they claimed they've confiscated it and all this. Now, this is such a nuisance. This can't stand up, I don't think. But it shows that there's no respect on the part of prosecutors and attorney generals for law. It's a weapon, and they use it as a weapon. And this tells you that civilization's collapsing. The greatest achievement of the British people, and it took them centuries, was the rule of law, which means that everyone is accountable to law. But the law is formed in a way that it is a shield that protects people from false or arbitrary accusations. And they did this because that's what the governments used to do. If they didn't like somebody, they just made an accusation and threw him in a dungeon. Well, that's what we're back to now. That's what we're doing now. The New York Attorney General doesn't like Trump. The Attorney General of the New York State and the New York City and the Fulton County, well, they don't like Trump, so make an accusation, throw him in jail. This is, but Larry, this has been kind of coming our way for a long time. And I wrote a book about it maybe 25 years ago. But in this century, Bush and Cheney and Obama have huge responsibility. You have to remember that Bush and Cheney claimed that the president could set aside habeas corpus and that he could detain American citizens indefinitely without presenting evidence to a court. This was part of the war on terror. And Obama said, he went further. He said, well, I can execute them on suspicion alone. This was his excuse for assassinating the American citizen who was also some kind of an Islamic religious leader. And this guy was somewhere over in the Middle East, and Obama sent a missile after him. Well, when a president claims he can execute people without due process of law, and the president claims he can throw people in dungeons without presenting any evidence to a court, this is the medieval time. This is medieval judicial behavior. That the rule of law stopped. And so now we're back to that. That's where we are. We're back to this time.
Well, what I find interesting about this is there's always been some of that dirty work behind the scenes, but it took a step way up high when, as you say, Obama and the others declared that they could do it legally. Doing it behind the scenes, it shouldn't have been done, but they used to do it at least behind the scenes, not admitting to it, not covering up. Now they admit it and crow about it, and that's the new norm.
Yeah, they claim that it's a right they have.
Yeah,
but of course they don't have that right. And there's really no outcry. That's what is so disturbing. You would have thought that the bar associations would be screaming and the law schools would be screaming. And of course, we don't have a media anymore, but if we had one, they would have been screaming. But now I think, Larry, conviction in the media is the norm. We saw this in a powerful way with the police officer, Derek Chauvin,
right,
who allegedly killed George Floyd. Well, he was tried in the media and convicted so thoroughly, particularly with all the rampages in the blue cities, burning down the business districts and all of this. And he was so thoroughly convicted in the media that the evidence played no role at the trial. Everyone had seen the film taken by the little black teenage girl from a distance that has what experts explain is a distortion angle. And it looked like his knee was on this guy's neck. Well, what all the police videos up close show is the knees on the shoulder, which is the way you hold people. Now, why was he being held? Again, all the evidence was clear. George Floyd had an overdose of fentanyl, which is rampaging through the country now, killing people right and left. They're just dropping like flies from overdoses. The autopsy showed that George Floyd had 2.5 times the fatal dose of fentanyl in his blood. More evidence was that he was complaining to the police that he couldn't breathe when he was sitting in the back of the car, in the police car. He was sitting in the car and said, I can't breathe, let me out, and I want to lay down. All of this is tape, all of this is evidence. So the notion that Chauvin stopped him breathing by having his knee on the neck and killed him is nonsense. He didn't have his knee on his neck. Floyd couldn't breathe because he was dying from an overdose of fentanyl. He was complaining about the inability to breathe before he ever lay down, before there was any restraint on him. And this came out in the trial, but the jurors could not possibly make a decision on that basis because he was already convicted. And if they let him off and went home, they'd have Antifa on the lawn, Black Lives Matter on the lawn. The neighbors wouldn't speak to them. the media would beat them up, and they knew that they couldn't do anything but convict him. He was already convicted. Now, I can remember when I was young that if any newspaper said somebody was guilty before the jury did, it was grounds for mistrial.
Yeah, good point.
The judge dismissed the case.
Yeah.
Now, after a while, that got modified a little bit, and what they would do, they would say, well, we can't try it in this jurisdiction that sees this newspaper. We have to go to a different state. We can try them somewhere else. Or, but if it was a national thing, case was over. You couldn't go to court because the jury would be prejudiced. And so you could not get an honest jury that would listen to the case and decide on the basis of the objective evidence. They would go already convinced he's guilty. They read it in the newspaper, he's guilty. Well, that's what happened to Chauvin. So this shows another breakdown of legal protection, of legal processes. The case against Chauvin should have been simply dismissed because he was already tried and convicted in the media, and no jury could possibly survive going against that. you know, what you couldn't possibly have survived it. Just try to imagine, had you been on a jury and you said, no, he's not guilty, who would be on your lawn? You'd be harassed the rest of your life. You'd probably be fired if you had a job. So we got off on the Chauvin as an example of how what was once grounds for throwing a case out is now the basis of conviction. You see, Trump is already convicted in the minds of everybody who buys into the propaganda and doesn't like it. He's guilty. Yeah. So you could say he can't possibly get a trial, fair trial, certainly not in New York or Fulton County, Georgia. These are areas controlled by Democrats. The juries will be black. The prosecutors are black. He doesn't have, there's no chance even of getting a jury of his peers. Who are his peers? Not the people that are going to be on the jury. And certainly they're all convinced he's guilty. So the case should be thrown out. But of course, it can't be because law is a weapon. It's not law. It's that simple.
Paul, I know your time's limited today, but wrapping it up, what do you think is going to happen in the next 4 years? I mean, are we at the point of no return? It cannot be reversed. It's going to get worse. What do you think?
I don't see what can reverse it, Larry, because it's accepted. Where's the ACLU?
Yeah.
Where's the bar associations? Where are the law schools? Where are the judges? Where's the Congress? The Congress is all, of course, it's in turmoil now with the speaker being removed and all the funding for the war in Ukraine up in the air because they can't settle anything now. But they don't address the real issues. And they accept it. I mean, where was Congress when Bush said, I suspend habeas corpus, I can arrest people and hold them indefinitely without court, presenting evidence to court? Well, they sold this because, oh, we're under a Muslim threat. The Muslims are going to get us. Blah. Yeah. Oh, if you give in to that, then you lose the protection of law. And when Obama essentially murdered that man, he committed murder. The president of the United States committed murder because he killed a guy because he suspected him of being some kind of a Muslim terrorist. There was no indictment, no court case, no trial. He just said, kill him. Well, it's been a long time since even kings could do anything like that.
Will it make any difference, Paul, if a Republican gets in the next presidential election, maybe even Trump, although we both think that there's no way they're going to allow Trump to be president. But if a Republican gets in, Biden and his crew are out, will it make any difference? Could it be reversed?
I don't see how. First of all, there's not that much difference between the Republicans and Democrats. I mean, Matt Gaetz is unusual. He's the guy that got McCarthy out. Who do the Republicans have? Well, they've got Jim Jordan. They got this guy Comer. They got a couple in the Senate, Rand Paul, Grassley. What is it Ron Johnson, the guy I think from Minnesota who got into the COVID vax issue, pointing out. But most of them are just get along. They're part of the establishment. You could see this. I mean, when Matt Gaetz got McCarthy evicted, he only had 7 or 8 Democrats vote with him. McCarthy was evicted by the Democrats.
Yeah.
So the Republicans were standing with the guy who was cooperating with the Democrats, not with the guy who was fighting against them.
They had only 7 or 8 Republicans voting with him. The rest were Democrats.
Yeah. See, that's what Gaetz knew, that he didn't have any Republicans to support him, but he knew the Democrats would get rid of him, just to throw the Republicans into disarray. So what I'm telling you, I think, to answer your question this way, when the people who are responsible for the law lose their belief in it, how do you turn it around? You can't turn it around without the law schools, without the bar associations. I mean, how can you? They're it. And what do they? The law schools actually teach the law students that the Constitution is a racist document that we shouldn't have. Well, all of these protective principles are in the Bill of Rights, but if it's a racist document, why do you want it? So they've brainwashed, they've indoctrinated a couple of generations of lawyers. And they've lost belief. They don't believe in law as a shield. It is a force you use for social change, to advance the blacks, to punish racists. This is what they're taught in the law schools. I'm not making this up. And we still have out there among the older lawyers people that were taught differently. And so they're kind of a diminishing offset to the new breed, but they're going away. They're retiring, they're dying, they're being replaced in the senior partners. They're on their way out, and the guys coming in have all learned that the Constitution's in the way of social progress, and the law is something we use for reforming society and punishing the people in the way of society, and that is now how all Trump voters are classified. So how do you turn it around? You couldn't. I mean, a civil war, if there was a civil war, but who are the leaders? Who are the leaders to say, hey, we're not putting up with this. We're not having it. And how would they get organized? They don't control the military or the bioweapons or the police or so. No, I don't think it can be turned around. I think the United States is essentially now a tyranny. And I think they may not get away with this Trump stuff. There may be enough real judges higher up. I assume these things, when he gets convicted, I assume they can be appealed. Though I think Derek Chauvin has had a very difficult time getting an appeal. I haven't followed that. I don't know. It's almost impossible to find out anything. So I think that I don't know what's going to happen. It may be the Trump people will see the writing on the wall and just not stand for it in some way. On the other hand, they may just say, well, it's hopeless. It's all over. There's nothing we can do. They don't, there's no respect for the Constitution. There's no respect for any of our rights. And they've been seeing that over and over. You know, parents go to school board meetings. They say, stop telling my little girl she's a racist. And they beat you up and throw you out of the meeting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you go and say, why did you let that kid say he's transgendered and rape my daughter in the girls' room? And he gets beat up and thrown out of the meeting. And they can't, what can they do? You know, they can't even protest. You know, it came out not long ago, the FBI had created a unit to monitor parents as domestic extremists who complain in school board meetings.
Right.
Well, if you can't even open your mouth. And what they're doing right now is criminalizing any dissent from official narratives. That's what's happening right now. And we see it with the FBI's announcement. They've now formed a new unit. They're talking about using the counterterrorism tactics they used against Al-Qaeda, against Trump supporters. I think I published something today about that.
Which is designed to intimidate anybody who even speaks out just generally supporting Trump. I mean, they're increasing the intimidation factor to crush dissent, as you're saying. They
are, and it's even worse. They are starting the acceptance on the part of the public that dissent is criminal.
Yeah.
That if you go against the narrative, you are a domestic terrorist. You're spread, you know, they do it gradually. You know, initially it's misinformation. You're spreading misinformation, and you have to be censored. But now we're getting where you're engaging in terrorism. You're a threat. You're a dangerous threat to the country. Now you're no longer just spreading disinformation. They've already moved that you're a dangerous threat. I think I published something about this today, quoting the FBI saying that the Trump supporters are the greatest danger the country faces. This is what they say. They said it. I think it's in the Newsweek story, quoted. I think it's verbatim quoted in that. Well, look how quick the transition was made from being disinformation to a dangerous threat.
Yeah.
Well, how do you recover? How do you get out of this? I mean, what do? You have to change all the top FBI leadership. You don't know how many that just the ordinary agents are affected. They went to school too. They went to school and learned they were racist, and the Constitution protects the wrong people, and it's in the way of social progress. This is what they've all been learning for years, Larry.
Yeah. You know, which brings to mind another question, Paul. Let's assume Trump does regain the presidency. Can even he root out all these deep state operatives? You know, would he be able to finally drain the swamp?
Who would he appoint? Where is he going to find them? They'd have to be, for the most part, I think, they'd have to be older people who weren't recently educated.
Yeah.
And older people are, for the most part, tired. They don't want to be in these kinds of fights. And I don't know. I don't know how he turns it around. Who would he appoint? He doesn't. It's hard to know. I just don't see how he. The most likely thing is the Secret Service would kill him. That's the most likely thing to happen.
The Praetorian Guard, like the Roman emperors, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the Roman emperors created the Praetorian Guard to protect them, and it ended up controlling them. I mean, the emperor became a creature of the Praetorian Guard, and there were cases where they decided who the emperor was.
Yeah.
So when the professional classes responsible for law and the professional classes responsible for education lose confidence in the beliefs that the country's based on, the country's gone. How do you get it back? It's just gone. And what we are seeing happening in the United States is the structure of belief is collapsing. Now, maybe not, again, among all the ordinary people, but among the people whose job it is to uphold it and enforce law and educate, they don't believe it anymore. So, a long time ago, a Frenchman wrote a book. It was called Treason of the Intellectuals. And he argued that the intellectuals are always undermining the society. So they're good for, he said. And I think that's really, it's really the problem. I mean, where's the uproar? There's not any. There's not an uproar. And they're also now closing down alternative media.
Yeah.
So if you're a very strong voice, you're getting closed out.
Yeah.
And even former left-wing icons like Naomi Wolf, she's being canceled. And if you look at left-wing journalists like Glenn Greenwald, they remove him. You see, he gets canceled. Now I think he's operating on Substack or Rumble or one of. Look at Matt Taibbi. Matt Taibbi was a left-wing journalist for what? Mother Jones, Rolling Stone, one of those. He was their most popular writer. He was a good journalist.
Yeah.
He wrote. He did brilliant investigations. Well, they didn't like what he was saying. He was objective, honest, so off he went.
Tucker Carlson.
Now, think about a media company silencing its most important asset that brings in the most money, that has the biggest viewers, the most viewers. I mean, and this is what they do. So how do you turn around? I mean, if you go against them, you become a non-person. You're shut down, you're demonized. They do everything they can to block your ability to even speak. And now I think they are going to criminalize disagreeing with official narratives. I think this is very close, and I think that if you read that Newsweek article, which I think I wrote about today,
Yeah.
I really think we're in danger of mass incarcerations. They just round people up and put them in camps.
It's unbelievable that we're even talking about this
I
as a.
know it is. It sounds like I'm crazy, but if you just read what the FBI said, what they tell Newsweek,
Yeah.
it's clearly the implication. I mean, how can you say that Trump and his supporters are the greatest danger to the United States and not do anything about it?
Yeah.
So, Larry, I think it's clear that Biden has no chance whatsoever of winning the election.
Unless you can't, if I say it outright, they'll shut me down. But unless certain things happen that happened in the last election, allegedly.
Well, I think what they'll do if they can't get Trump out of it, they can't get him convicted and put in jail or something. If they can't get Trump out of it, he's clearly going to win because the polls show it has this massive lead.
Yeah.
They're just going to declare no election because Trump and his supporters are already defined by the FBI and U.S. intelligence as the greatest threat America's ever faced. So how can they let the greatest threat America's ever faced take over the country?
Yeah.
They can't. So they're just going to say, well, the election, it's national emergency. It's a national emergency. We're facing a coup or an insurrection. They'll call a Trump election victory an insurrection.
Yeah.
That's what. See, they've already called a rally an insurrection.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly, Trump win. It's an insurrection. So again, your question, I don't see any way to recover. You could say, okay, armed rebellion, but the people aren't organized. There wouldn't be any time to organize. The FBI is organized. And whether it's conspiracy theories or not, I don't know. But, for years, people have been saying all these FEMA camps they've built everywhere are really concentration camps. They're going to herd people into them. How do we know? I mean, it sounds preposterous, but why are they there? For some reason.
What strikes me, Paul, is how rapidly this is happening. It's accelerated so much under Biden as soon as he got in. I mean, even 5 years ago, what we're discussing now would seem totally preposterous, impossible. Now, these are distinct possibilities, and it's getting worse and worse. And I think what's making it work is that the newer generation is accepting this as normal and necessary. Journalism schools are teaching future journalists that social justice justifies slanting a story in order to achieve social justice. Objectivity is no longer encouraged or valued or necessary.
That's right, because objectivity is a white supremacist tool of oppression. This is what they are taught. And of course, you can't find a journalist today that's capable of independent thought.
Yeah.
Not a journalist in the print or TV media.
Yeah.
Or NPR. So the same thing is happening to journalism is happening to lawyers. And so the whole the whole thing is infected, and they don't believe in the principles on which the country is based. They just don't believe it anymore. It's been brainwashed into them through decades of education.
And we can't even move to Canada anymore. Canada's worse.
It's even worse. That's right. It's even worse. And so I think that the country, we've crossed the Rubicon, and the Constitution is essentially already a destroyed document. You try to find one principle that's still in it other than the Second Amendment. That is the strangest thing, isn't it? First Amendment's dead, the 14th Amendment's dead, all of them are dead, but Second Amendment.
They're going after that too, though.
So that's very strange. But yeah, the courts have protected the Second Amendment, but not the First Amendment.
Mm. Not the
14th. See, we haven't had the 14th Amendment ever since we had affirmative action. See, the 14th Amendment requires equal treatment under the law. Well, affirmative action is privilege based on race. That's what they claim white people had, but now they have explicitly given it to blacks. It was never explicitly given to whites, but it's explicitly given to blacks in the form of university admission preferences, employment, hiring preferences, promotion preferences. They're all race-based. You know, we've had recently a whole spate of large American corporations say we're only hiring and promoting blacks. Yeah. You know, Starbucks, for example, said it not long ago, and all the whites still run by Starbucks coffee. Yeah. Well, now imagine if Starbucks said we're only hiring and promoting whites. The Justice Department would be on them like a ton of bricks. Well, how is this white privilege? It's black privilege. Well, any kind of privilege is against the 14th Amendment. So, and you know, it's really extraordinary because the First and 14th Amendment were the great amendments that all white liberals loved. That was that they would always use the protection of the First Amendment to stop people from censoring pornography or whatever they were trying to advance. And of course, 14th Amendment, they all were always using that for integration. But now they've abandoned both of them. In fact, they're criminalized in the First Amendment, and the 14th Amendment's been abandoned since the Equal Employment Opportunity Office created quotas. Yeah. And people don't know this, but the 1964 Civil Rights Act, in the most explicit language possible, strictly forbids quotas. But the EEOC imposed them, and nobody did anything about it. They pretended, oh, this is temporary. These aren't really quotas. These, you know, and they call them affirmative action. They use all kinds of euphemisms, and now they're simply inherited rights. And now we have the big, not only the big corporations, but the Department of Defense announced all holds for white troops, all promotions for white troops are on hold because we got too many white officers. In other words, merit's out the window too. Nothing goes by merit. It goes by, oh, we got quotas. Yeah. We got to advance the blacks or whoever it is they want to advance, and the various sexual perverts. What do they call them?
I can't keep track of all
Well, you know, so how do you turn it around? I mean, when the military is part of it, the security agency is a part of it, and they spy on us all the time. This is another constitutional violation that we're constantly spied on without warrants, and nothing is done about it.
Yeah, Paul, this brings to mind another comparison that there have been periods before of extreme action, unconstitutional action. For instance, during the Second World War, the paranoia with the Japanese Americans in California, the Red Scare, the McCarthy hearings in the 1950s. Those went to extremes, but then it was done away with after a while. But the difference today is this extremism, these unconstitutional approaches continue and are actually now being enshrined in law.
That's right. See, the huge difference is that those earlier excesses were not the result of educating journalists and lawyers. That the country was rotten and evil and racist, and that a rule of law has to be overthrown because it's in the way of using law for social improvements.
Yeah.
And all of that hadn't happened. And so it were just excesses that could be corrected. But now it's not just an excess, it's a change in belief systems.
Yeah.
So that's why you can't correct it. The belief systems are gone. This is what they've been doing for decades. And they get, you know, as you go through, say, starts somewhere in the 60s. But as you go through it, it gets worse and worse. And now there's nothing left of the belief system. And when the older generations die, nobody will even know what freedom meant or what liberty meant. Liberty means raising up somebody at somebody else's expense. And so that's why I don't think you can turn it around. I mean, we should try, obviously. I mean, we do. That's why we speak out. I'm not sure how much longer anybody's going to be allowed to speak out, because they can turn you off. They can stop any donations. You know, PayPal, all the rest of them will cooperate. They just cut off the funds. You know, it's just, and if they get digital money, they have total control. Nobody would be able to say anything. The situation is dire, where the belief system is collapsing, and that's the problem. And it's a product of a change in how the law is taught, the function of justice, and the function of journalism, and it's all being changed. And so the journalists no longer are watchdogs of government. They are agents to help the government bring social change. And the same for lawyers and prosecutors and attorneys, U.S. attorneys, state attorney generals, and they're instruments of social change. And so there are favored classes now. And who are you changing social for? You're making social changes for who? Well, not for the Trump supporters. Yeah, you're making worse for them because you're saying they're a threat, they're a danger. They expressed an opinion that you don't like, so this makes them a danger. So the Trump supporters are all being demonized, and then the other guys are all being praised and rescued. And this is not a rule of law. It's not a system in which there's any objectivity. It's an emotional system which favors certain things and disfavors others. and this is now why they try people in the media. This guy we don't like, we'll convict him. This other guy we like, so we'll rescue him. And that's the way it is. It's just not the facts. When facts don't matter, you're lost.
Yeah.
So anybody can make a charge. Maybe they want your property. Maybe they want your wife. You don't know. Anybody can make a charge. And that's what happens when facts don't matter. When emotion prevails over reason and objectivity is in the way, then facts don't matter. Everybody is subject to being a victim of false charges. And that's the world that they're creating. It's actually, they've created it. That's the world we're in.
Well,
Facts did Derek Chauvin no good whatsoever.
Yeah.
The facts of the case did not bear on his trial. And that's what the Democrats are hoping will happen with Trump. They got 4 indictments. They're just hoping the facts don't matter. And they've kind of got it set up where they won't matter.
Well, Paul Craig Roberts, to be continued if they allow us to continue. Thanks once again, Paul, and much more topics to discuss in the future. It's always a pleasure talking with you.
Okay, well, it's good that you raise these issues. So who knows? We do what we can as long as we can.
Later. Okay, Paul.